This video is part of a series using the Marvel Cinematic Universe to learn about the Enneagram and the Enneagram to learn about the MCU. If you're not familiar with the Enneagram, you can find my intro episode at the first link in the description or in the card up here.
Non mi deixo conforme. Che? Non van quando io fome.
Today we're going to talk about Bruce Banner and the other guy, and we're going to talk about Enneagram Type 9, the Peacemaker. Type 9's basic fear is of loss, separation, or annihilation, and their basic desire is for inner stability and peace of mind. This desire for inner peace often translates to actively working for outer peace in their environment or community, and to that end they tend to repress any sense of their own wants, needs, feelings, and even identity. They tend to be super agreeable and easygoing people, but since that comes at the expense of acknowledging or exploring their own wants, and by the means of repressing the kinds of feelings that tend to cause conflict, that affable front is prone to crack into resentment and passive aggression. Or, not so passive.
People of this subtype often have bad tempers, although it's difficult to predict what will set them off. They can be blunt and explosive, but suddenly return to a state of calm and placidity.
So here's a question that would be totally reasonable to ask. We've got 9 types, numbers 1 through 9. Why are we starting at the end? Well, for one thing, the order of the numbers is relatively arbitrary. It means something, but it's not a ranking or a lesson plan or anything, so I can start wherever I damn well please. But I'm not just throwing darts at balloons here, and we're not just starting with Type 9, we're starting with Bruce Banner. And I think you'd be hard-pressed to come up with a pop culture icon more perfectly gift-wrapped for a psychological lens. Banner's superpower is very literally his inner journey given physical form. He's afraid and avoidant of his anger, and he's dropped into a story that simultaneously makes it more terrifying to face and absolutely demands that he learn to manage and direct it. The result is a sort of psychological hero's journey, a through line that looks surprisingly like a chapter of the wisdom of the Enneagram written out in narrative form. Banner is far from the extent of what the Enneagram can do for your story, but he is about as perfect an introduction as you could ask for. Quick reminder before we get started, this character was originally played by Edward Norton in The Incredible Hulk, but he was replaced by Mark Ruffalo in The Avengers. So this guy and this guy are both Bruce Banner. You won't like either of them when they're angry. When we first meet Banner, we find him in hiding, settled into a relatively mindless work routine, putting his energy into learning to suppress his feelings and seeking a way to literally, via dialysis, remove his personal barrier to inner and outer peace. This is a classic example of a big recurring theme for 9s, the idea of going to sleep, disconnecting from their feelings and from any sense of self in order to avoid anything that might trigger conflict. Rizzo and Hudson connect this to the cardinal passion of sloth. I didn't mention this in the intro, but traditionally the Enneagram links each type to one of the 7 deadly sins, plus deceit and fear to make 9. That can lead to some pretty cool archetypal stuff if you're into that sort of thing, but it's not my personal favorite framework, especially as an introduction, and sloth in 9s is kind of a prime example of why. A lot of people take this concept of sloth to mean that 9s just want to lie on the couch watching TV forever, and while I'm sure that's true of some, many 9s express this sloth by staying incredibly busy, just like Bruce here. He's a high-performing employee, he rescues his coworker from creeps, he goes to this dojo and gets slapped in his free time. Even when he does collapse into his comfy chair with noodles and TV, he's still doing homework. Lazy, the man is not. But the 9s brand of sloth isn't so much about what they do, but how they do it. Like Bruce, slothful, sleeping 9s may be out and about doing a ton of stuff, but in a way that allows them to disconnect from themselves and from any emotional impact that the world around them would cause. The busy work quality of Bruce's warehouse job is one way that this can look, but so is the much more apparently demanding nature of his work as a doctor in The Avengers. Absorbing the urgent, disaster-level needs of others is precisely the sort of distraction from their inner conflict that nines seek. In healthy nines, this selfless focus on others can manifest as a tremendous capacity for genuine care and support, but in average nines, like Banner at this point in the story, it can begin to serve as an excuse to stay out of touch with themselves. Any assertion of their own wants, needs, or feelings, particularly anything negative or conflict-laden like pain, frustration, or anger, would threaten their connection to the other person or people. This results in one of their most characteristic patterns of behavior.
Nines experience the temptation to be overly accommodating to others because they fear that if they get into conflicts with people, they'll lose their connections with them. Simply put, nines get into the habit of saying yes to things that they normally wouldn't do.
This is incredibly clear in Bruce's first scene with Natasha. His words sound like he's resisting, but you can see it on his face. He already knows exactly what's about to happen, that he's not gonna like it, but that he's gonna go along with it anyway. But there is a limit to what he'll agree to.
Even though nines tend to be accommodating, they have an inner core of stubbornness and resistance, a desire to not be affected by anyone or anything they see as threatening to their inner peace. Beneath the surface calm, average nines are brick walls. Beyond a certain point, they're not going to budge.
Using the Hulk as a weapon is a major threat to Banner's internal and external peace. He loses control and causes tons of collateral damage, yes, but he also has to live into the feelings that wreck his Zen front, and not just acknowledge them, but be completely overwhelmed and overtaken by them, which is exactly what nines try to avoid at all costs. So Banner's brick wall is the Hulk, and this means that even early in his story, he appears to be pretty darn assertive for an average nine, because everyone wants the Hulk. The US military, the US military, the US military again, even Mr. Blue, who was supposed to get rid of the big guy, wants to use Banner's blood to make more Hulks. So when S.H.I.E.L.D. tracks him down, it's understandable that Banner puts up a bit of a fight, but not too much. Turns out they only want him for his brain after all, and going quietly means the other guy stays out of the way.
Why don't we do this the easy way where you don't use that and the other guy doesn't make a mess?
When Banner joins up with the rest of the Avengers, we start to see the way he puts himself out there in social settings, revealing another characteristic pattern.
Average nines see themselves as nobody special, the modest person who is content to stay in the background and not cause any inconvenience to others.
This is exactly how we see Banner dealing with this whole Tesseract situation. While Tony, Steve, and Thor quickly fall into a contest of egos, trying to prove who's the biggest and the best and the strongest, Bruce is very pointedly just here to do a job. He'll use his expertise to help locate the Tesseract and help save as much of the day as he can from the lab, but he absolutely will not hit the battlefield or take the spotlight.
It's gonna blow up in his face. And I'm gonna be there when it does.
I'll read all about it.
This self-image as nobody special and the habit of disappearing into relationships with others can clearly feed one another in average nines, and I would argue that this tendency is especially pronounced in Banner's case because I read him as a sexual variant type. Sexual variant nines are especially prone to losing themselves in relationships, and they tend to be particularly drawn to people who embody the big, assertive energy they suppress in themselves.
Idealizing nines are often attracted to stronger, more aggressive people. If an outstanding person has some kind of relationship with them, their sense of self-worth is increased.
So there's more to Banner's instant connection with Tony than that they are the brainy boys in a room full of brawn. Tony is headstrong, impulsive, attention-hungry, and generally everything Banner is afraid to allow himself to be. He brings a vitality to the table that Bruce can feed off of without having to assert on his own, and he kicks Bruce's self-esteem up by showing the interest in him that he denies himself.
You're tiptoeing, big man. You need to strut.
And, as can often be the case for nines in this type of relationship, this is great on Tony's end, too. As much as his antagonistic butt-face side needs someone to constantly nag, genius billionaire playboy philanthropists need adoration, too. Not to mention someone to drag into their harebrained schemes.
It's bugging him too, isn't it?
I just want to finish my work here.
Which brings us to Age of Ultron, where the dark side of this kind of relationship really starts to rear its ugly head. Nines are apt to be taken advantage of. Tony plows ahead with the plan to create Ultron and then Vision, depending on Banner to go along with it and turning on him when he pushes back.
You just roll over, show your belly every time somebody snarls.
Only when I've created a murder bot.
And crucial to all of this is that Banner is not doing well at this point. It's clear that the emotional impact of regularly turning green and murderous, even in a reasonably controlled way for the greater good, is taking a toll on him.
Thor, report on the Hulk?
Gates of hell are filled with the screams of his victims.
And that's before Scarlet Witch knocks him on his heels and sends him reeling back into the kind of uncontrollable, unsalvageable, uncomeback-fromable rage fest he thought he'd put behind him. This is a red flag moment for Banner. Despite the story he tells himself, his feelings are still entirely out of his control in a way that's a serious danger to him, his friends, and any poorly placed civilians, and cordoning his anger off from his sense of self is only making it worse.
The world just saw the Hulk. The real Hulk for the first time.
Now he has a choice. And
when their coping skills are insufficient to contain their anxieties, 9s go to 6, investing themselves in ideas or relationships that they believe will give them more security and stability.
Disintegration. Rather than deal with his unpeaceful core, rather than open himself up to the idea that a healthy, well-rounded existence has to involve embracing the occasional conflict, Banner leans into his less than totally healthy friendship with Tony, the possibility that his plan might save the day after all, and Natasha. The person who literally brings him back from the brink, who has driven away the conflict-inducing side of him time and time again. He pours himself into her so deeply that he is ready to leave his team to deal with the impending extinction of all carbon-based life on Earth without him and without her. He's not just ready to do it, he honestly believes it's the right thing to do.
I said I wasn't gonna do film criticism, but if even one of you fuckers uses this video to try to argue that actually Black Widow is a great and well-rounded character who was not done dirty by the MCU, then I will actually literally turn into a giant green rage monster and I will not be responsible for my actions. So let me just say, for the record, that Natasha Romanoff was dealt a raw deal by this continuity, and if you want to use Bruce Banner Enneagram 9 as your lens for that, then it still checks out.
Because yes, Banner throwing himself into this fantasy of running away with Natasha is absolutely on point for this character's darkest moment, but that does not require her reciprocation. It does not mean you need her to be super attracted so out of nowhere to someone with whom she has so little chemistry that she literally has to explain in words why she's into him. It does not mean she needs to bond with him about how she's a monster because she cannot bear children. It does not require her to kiss him. Average to unhealthy 9s are particularly prone to idealizing the objects of their affection so completely that their relationship is almost more to an image of the person than the person themselves. So if anything, it would just up the stakes of this character beat if Nat really is just a supportive coworker and a harmless flirt who happens to have the levelest head on the team, and Bruce has his head so far up his own hyper-idealizing ass that he missed all the signs, and now Hulk's got one more heartbroken reason to be angry as fuck. Because he is angry as fuck, and Banner isn't coming back. Bruce is quite literally overtaken by his long-repressed rage. Hulk runs away in a Queenjet, and Banner doesn't show his face for 2 years.
Very unhealthy 9s feel unable to face reality at all. They withdraw into themselves and become completely unresponsive. They may attempt to eliminate their awareness to save their illusions of peace through fragmenting themselves into sub-personalities.
That's what rock bottom looks like for a 9, and this is what rock bottom looks like for Banner. He's separated from the team he's been defining himself in support of by galaxies, crash-landed on the landfill of the universe where he's captured and forced to fight to the death for sport night after night after night. So he retreats into himself, throwing up the front of this alter ego who actually likes this life to keep the part of him that he considers to be him from having to face his reality.
No Banner, only Hulk!
And the tighter Banner grips this idea that he isn't Hulk, the harder it becomes for him to switch between the two separated sides of his personality. But once Banner manages to show his face again, a second time, something amazing happens. He starts to learn from Hulk. His return to Earth and his reunion with Tony sees him dropping pretty quickly into his usual pattern of accommodation.
Banner, you want a piece?
No, not really, but when do I ever get what I want?
That's right.
But Hulk puts his foot down. This is very literally one of the most important things that nines need to do in order to grow. Learn to say no to things they do not want to do, even if not especially when it means disappointing the people they most want to please. But that's not the only thing Banner learns from Hulk. Dropped onto the battlefield with stakes even higher than usual and a big green guy who still refuses to show his face, Bruce does something unprecedented.
Oh, screw you, you big green asshole! I'll do it myself!
And this moment is perhaps the most characteristic in the journey of growth for nines.
For most nines, anger is very threatening. Of all the emotions, it feels like the one that can most easily destroy their inner peace. Yet, it's only through their anger that they will connect with their own inner power. It is the fuel that will burn away their inertia.
Up to this point, Bruce has boxed up his anger and any potential for violence in a place he's able to consider separate from himself. In The Incredible Hulk, he's able to avoid acknowledging that this is even about anger. Hulk is a purely physiological phenomenon, not even a split personality, but a thing he's shackled to.
I don't want to control it. I want to get rid of it.
By the end of the Avengers, he manages to admit out loud that the Hulk is rooted not just in his feelings, but in feelings he is constantly keeping at bay just under the surface.
That's my secret, Captain. I'm always angry.
After 2 years hiding his own face, he's finally able to call the Hulk by name and, at least on some level, acknowledge that he is part of him.
You're just using me to get to the Hulk.
You wanted to know who I am? You'll see!
But it's not until he's denied access to the place where he usually keeps his rage that Banner is finally able to own his anger as himself and on his own behalf. Not a shameful monster that isn't really him.
You think you can control?
No, not control it, but I don't know, maybe aim it.
Not a minor crack in the dam of suppression.
You want to know my secret, Agent Romanoff? You want to know how I stay calm?
Dr. Banner. Put down the scepter.
Not a moment of sass empowered by the real strong guys he gets to hide behind.
You guys are so screwed now!
But genuine, productive, healthy anger and the strength that comes with it. And this moment of power starts Banner's journey of integration as he literally integrates the segmented pieces of his personality into one whole person.
Hulk, we got a lot to figure out, pal.
When Banner re-enters the story after Endgame's time jump, he's almost unrecognizable, and not just because he's green all the time.
Nines become actualized and remain healthy by learning to recognize their own essential value, like healthy threes. In effect, they recognize that they are worth their own time and energy. They work at developing themselves and their potential and put themselves out in the world, letting others know what they have to offer.
This is the integrated Professor Hulk we meet at the diner.
For years, I've been treating the Hulk like he's some kind of disease, something to get rid of. But then I start looking at him as the cure. 18 months in the gamma lab. I put the brains and the brawn together. And now look at me. Best of both worlds.
No longer desperate to shrink into the background and let the big, shiny, muscly dudes take focus, Banner is at home in the spotlight, brimming with generosity for his fans and his teammates alike. And as the band gets back together and a plan takes shape, we see a whole new side of even Bruce's brainier protocol. He takes charge, he's graceful under pressure, able to absorb challenges in the moment and act as a rock for the nerve-ridden team in a way that embodies all of the best qualities of healthy nines. Patience, endurance, stability, inclusivity, openness, and a kind of optimism about the people who surround him.
Hey, have a little compassion, pal. First they lost Asgard, then half their people. They're probably just happy to have a home.
He's even able to express and process explosive rage, to let it out in its purest form and then channel it into productive action.
She's not coming back. We have to make it worth it.
It's also not incidental that Banner's transformation means that he physically takes up space all of the time and is generally striking in appearance. This is not the face of a man who can pass himself off as anything less than extraordinary, and it's not the face of a man who plans to fade into the background ever again.
Nines reclaim their essential nature by confronting their basic fear of losing connection by letting go of the belief that their participation in the world is unimportant. Doing so requires that they reconnect with their instinctual nature and with their physicality in an immediate way. Often this requires confronting repressed feelings of anger and rage that can be extremely threatening to their ordinary sense of self. But when nines stay with themselves and are able to integrate their anger, they begin to feel the stability and steadiness they have been seeking. From this platform of inner strength, actualizing nines become indomitable forces, graceful and powerful. powerful.
And for Banner, this culminates in a moment of genuine self-sacrifice. Not aiming a weapon and then stepping out of the way, not reluctantly agreeing to go along with someone else's plan, not neglecting his own needs in the secret hope that someone else will appreciate it and or take care of him, but willingly stepping out into the light and momentarily becoming the most powerful being in the whole damn universe. Because he is shiny, he is special, he is strong, and no one else in the world can do what he can do.
It's like, I was made for this.
Thank you so much to all of my patrons, with an extra special thank you to Barry, Critters My, Kaya, Lizzie Gray, LL Milk Tray, Mateo, Michelle, and Nikki Miskell. Special thanks also to Ramaj Autumn, who made the incredible track that you hear at the end of the video, inspired by the Avengers fanfare, and as always, to Zach Frazier for lending his voice to this video.